Thank you, everyone from around the world for joining our TPS podcast titled Driving the New Normal. My name is Hillary Veeder, Executive Vice President, Strategic Development for TPS, and I will moderate today's event. First, a little bit of housekeeping. The podcast will be approximately 30 minutes, and we do welcome live questions to our speakers via the question button on your screen. As you can imagine, we might get a lot of questions, so any questions that we do not get to that are still in the queue will be addressed within 48 hours via your registration contact information. So now I would like to introduce Dan Perlmann, our CEO.
Thank you, Hillary. And very much I want to thank everybody who is joining this call. I know it's crazy times, and for those who are technically challenged, and since we're surely going to talk about technology here, this is one of the new ways that are changing. And I'm sure that many of the people who are younger than me, this is really easy for them. But I've sort of was raised on touchy-feely, used to in-person meetings. But at least I can do these in my shorts. So again, thank you very much for being with us. Many things have changed very quickly in our industry in the last 3 months. This change is not new to the industry as far as change goes, but surely in the way that this has happened, it is different. And therefore, the solutions will have to be very different. As someone who originally did not come from the clinical industry, I first observed this industry that its methods of outsourcing were very manual and costly compared to other industries. Being highly regulated, the industry was adverse to change, even though its science piece was the most cutting edge of all industries, even up there with aerospace. In 2008, there was a financial crisis that forced the pharma industry to rethink its outsourcing strategies and look at novel ideas, inclusive of embedded solutions and more flexible programs structurally, and technologies such as EDC, etc., to help meet the financial goals that the industry took. It's not that these technologies and these structural changes did not exist beforehand. It's that they needed and had to change. The industry did change. However, after 2012, without enough financial pressure, in fact, they had reverse financial pressure on them, change slowed down. Small pharma fully relied on CROs in change. Mid pharma got caught in much of the same trap as small pharma, and large pharma began to use third-party vendors for structural change and for innovation. So therefore, structurally, nobody really changed the basis that clinical trials were on and the inefficiencies that they had. If you look at today, we have both a financial and a physical crisis. Without a doubt, clinical trials themselves have come under fire as being a second or third tier necessity for sites, hospitals, and industry in general. It is going to, without a doubt, force change, period. Okay, the old norm won't be. In some ways, that's really good. But in some ways, we're very worried about the Band-Aid, well, I'll call the Band-Aid approach. The question is, will it be just a short-term Band-Aid or a much longer-term solution that protects and heals the wound around it, and most importantly, would prevent future damage. In other and simple terms, the financial crisis that hit in 2008 started a change, but nobody ever leveraged that change. Okay. And while it did build some long-term solutions, and surely some of the technologies like EDC, et cetera, were implemented for a long-term goal, the actual structural change of doing a clinical trial did not change. And I'll explain a little more. Today, we will look and give some solutions to areas where change is long overdue. The observation and monitoring structure at sites is a problem. And the site CRC/patient structures are also problems. Both areas haven't changed in decades. Both areas are main places where trials fail, where the FDA focuses, and also, as a caveat, are the main places for extreme costs, and if you're using a CRO, change orders. Both areas are where third-party vendors overcharge and underdeliver. Bluntly, our current structure is inefficient and stupid. And without a doubt, today's environment, which limits going to sites, is going to force a change. Third parties would like to charge for efficiency, or what they perceive as efficiency. So I want to define it for everybody. Efficiency is a significant cost reduction with higher quality results measured in accuracy and speed. I like to always use an example of an industry that I came out of, which was the automotive industry. It is sort of like technology catching up in that industry, where they were able to use robotics to make different cars and run different tasks. What would have made sense to Ford to run those different tasks, but keep the people sitting there anyhow, just to watch and observe? In many ways, as technology has increased in this industry, we haven't changed those two structures I talked about. Today, it is important that our Band-Aids lead to a solution that's long-term. Don't let your company put in something that's a short-term fix to what's going to be a long-term problem. Make sure it's moved forward. It's tough to do in 30 minutes on a podcast. But because we think the solution itself is simple, I'm a tremendous believer that simple solutions are always the best because it's common sense. The tough part is the execution in your environment that makes the complexity that we're going to try and go over. Here are what the solutions have to include. The solution has to include an integrated structure for all areas, giving you, the sponsor company, the most amount of control and flexibility. The solution must use technology to all but eliminate most site visits. The solution must change the relationship with the sponsor and the site and the CRC at the site, and therefore the patient. And the solution can be implemented now as a way of saving sites, and I mean right now, who today, in today's world, are trying to get their feet on the ground in their regular practice and without clinical trials. In many of the sites that we deal with on a daily basis, they are looking for a solution that you bring that won't get in the way of them reopening their site. And most importantly of all, the solution must lead to a new, longer-term structure for us to move forward and make it so that the unison between the site, the patient, corresponds to the technology and other things that a sponsor company can bring, be it through their solution or what I call integrated partner solutions, which a CRO is not. Most third-party vendors are looking for just a piece of it, this piece, that piece, EDC, data management, whatever. Okay, not bringing a total solution with people who are familiar in the industry. With that, Hillary, I'd like to turn this over to Mike.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And maybe before I go, Dan, just get maybe in a minute, because I know we're going to be pushed for time in the 30-minute time frame. But maybe just give one example of the short-term solutions that we're actually seeing that that we've been asked to implement, and that leads us to try to move companies in a slightly different direction.
Sure. Part of our model includes, as we'll go over a little bit, in bringing coordinators and other things to sites and things like that. We've seen solutions where sponsor companies are using very cheap labor to call up and get more patients, but the sites don't need that as the solution. The problem, that's a Band-Aid for the farm company, not for the site, and everything needs to be inclusive. If we put together, which we have, solutions where we bring CRCs to the sites and the sponsors pay for it but get saved by it real time, that would be a longer term solution at a site using a short-term Band-Aid, not trying to get more patients there and using value adds that really don't add value to their need there. And I could go through a whole bunch of these, but like you say, there would be some time restraints here, and hopefully I can dig in. But here's a key word I used and that I want people to understand. Whoever your vendor needs in today's world, an integrated partner. Make a deal with them that if it works, it's good for them and good for you. But if it doesn't work, it's bad for them, because it's obviously, if it doesn't work, it's bad for you. Okay, Mike?
Yeah, Dan, that's perfect, because that kind of will lead into my piece, putting, inexperienced or roles in, trying to push them into sites to help them clean up backlog when we can't even get the CRAs in there is like you said, a short-term Band-Aid that's probably not even a solution that is going to work very well. So my name is Mike Smith, president of TPS, been in the industry almost 30 years now. And this is going to seem kind of strange, because I'm going to talk about CRAs, and I started my career as a CRA, and I actually managed many large monitoring organizations within big pharma, but I don't really understand the CRA role. I never really did understand the CRA role, and maybe it's not understanding, I just didn't really believe it was the right approach. And why, you'd have to kind of look at how we monitor today. So first, what do? We typically let sites determine the resource burden for a clinical trial and the type of infrastructure that they need. We don't really support them very well in that. We kind of send them a nowadays very complicated protocol and let them try to determine the infrastructure and the resource that they need. And then we send CRAs on a periodic basis to audit in quality after the fact. Okay, now, that's just how it's been done. As Dan mentioned, it's been done for the last 30, 40, 50 years. Now we've added RBM in the near future or recent future. So, using analytics to help target CRAs. So when they're on site, they can be a little bit more efficient. But again, that's still periodic and it's still an audit function. So it's still looking at issue management versus really managing risk and stuff. And Dan also mentioned that, to further complicate the way we monitor, that the industry has really moved towards outsourcing. And with outsourcing then comes, a lot of partial resources working across multiple sites, multiple protocols, and multiple sponsors, which also leads to significant turnover. So that's our kind of monitoring strategy today. And being a monitor for many years and managing monitoring organizations, I just really never understood that approach. And in a quality by design mindset, you wouldn't really approach it that way today. On top of that, Dan also mentioned that the significant cost of monitoring through CROs. In the last pharma company that I was at, my budget was over $300 million with close to 1,700 CRAs globally. And that was just my company. And then if you look at CROs, CROs, 30+% of their revenue comes from monitoring at margins in the 45% range and stuff. So it's a significantly expensive way to monitor clinical trials. So we've built up this very expensive army of resources, right, to basically focus on issue management, which by definition is reactive and not proactive. And we've done very, very little to focus on the sites, to try to standardize the sites, and to help them be productive, efficient, work within the complex protocols that we have today. And again, that's where the data is collected. So if we were to design a process from scratch today with a focus on quality by design or right first time approaches, would we look to put something in place that would audit in quality after the fact? Or would we put something in place that would focus on building the right infrastructure, empowering that infrastructure, so empowering the sites, because again, that's where patients are being treated, that's where the data is being collected. So the emphasis should be on improving that aspect of it, getting it right the first time, rather than sending in resources after the fact to audit in quality. So in a true quality by design mindset, we would clearly look for better ways to enable sites to provide quality data. And we would try to set it up in the most, cost effective, efficient way that we could do. Now, again, RBM helps in a way, and we have a great RBM solution at TPS. We have a proprietary technology that we call Raptor. We provide data scientists, central monitors, appropriately trained CRAs. So we have a true end-to-end solution around risk-based monitoring that we can provide. But again, it's still a reactive issue management approach. Yes, it's better than the old ways of blindly sending CRAs in on a periodic basis, but it is still not truly a move forward. It's a small step forward, but it's not how you would really want to do things if you're really focused on quality by design, which then leads us to virtual monitoring, and how you might deploy or put in a new paradigm or a new model that would really be much more virtual, would empower the sites, and in that way you would educate the sites on risks, train them on how to mitigate those risks. And that's what I think we all strive for. And I think in the new environment, the new normal, that's going to be incredibly important. So how would you do that? What does that look like? Again, the first thing you would start with is ensuring sites have adequate CRC support. I mentioned before in prior companies that I worked for, we would let the sites decide what they needed, and then we would nickel and dime them on budget. right? So, okay, you need 30% of a CRC, do you really need that? You nickel down your budget. And when you look at it, that's really kind of a short-sighted approach, right? Because a CRC resource is much less costly than a CRA resource, right? And CRAs have to travel to sites, there's pass-throughs and stuff. So you could fund at least 2 CRCs for every CRA out there. And then if you included all your pass-through costs and all the other costs of monitoring, you could probably double that, right? So, rather than nickel and diming the sites on their infrastructure and their ability to adequately resource, you're saving money in the short term and spending a large amount afterwards to then clean up the mess. So supporting the sites with appropriate infrastructure, that can include adding coordinators and actually providing coordinators. And that is something Dan mentioned. That's something that, we've built up the capability to do, because we're seeing in this environment that many of the sites can't stay open, can't afford to have their own coordinators. They don't get often paid until 3 months, 4 months after they provide services on a clinical trial and stuff. So the ability to source coordinators and to fund the coordinators becomes very important. The other aspect of having those coordinators at sites then is actually putting them in the process, actually empowering them to work directly with your central teams and stuff. And to do that, then you need a site-facing technology that puts the coordinators directly in the workflow. And Syed will go into that in more detail, into the actual technology solutions that are out there. But that technology approach is critical. And it's more than just providing the analytics to target your monitoring. And again, that's very important, and that's an absolute piece of virtual monitoring. But that in and of itself isn't enough. That you must have in those technology solutions workflow. You have to have the ability for the coordinators to interact directly with your central monitoring teams. And those central monitoring teams are informed by analytics, and just like they would be in an RBM scenario. But those central teams are now interacting directly with the coordinators through a validated system in a near real-time fashion. So it's no longer periodic, and it's no longer sending a resource in after the fact. The actual coordinators are now actually interacting directly with the central teams on a real-time basis. So through this, I don't want to imply that CRAs are completely eliminated in this type of scenario, right? You're taking them out of the middle. They're no longer the middleman. You're relying on your central teams through the technology solution, and then training of the coordinators, in a new way of working, to do this. But you still have scenarios where the sites need support. There's always study startup activity, site initiation, drug accountability, reg review. The sites just may be struggling and just can't mitigate the risks on their own, and they need support. So there's still a role for the CRA moving forward. We've kind of retermed these resources as quality research associates or QRAs, but there is still a need for a role out there to support the sites, albeit it is a significantly reduced number of required resources. Now, we've been looking at this for years. As I said, I've been in the industry a long time. I've never really been a fan or understood the approach of auditing in quality after the fact rather than addressing the issues up front. Dan's been a big mover in the organization over many years in terms of having sponsors take back control, build infrastructure, so that they can monitor the trials themselves. So we've been working on this. This is absolutely possible today, but we believe that this was required well before the COVID-19 epidemic. But now, looking at COVID-19, it's more relevant than ever, right? What's happening today? CRAs are not allowed to go to sites. Sure, there's quite a few sites where patients are coming in at a reduced frequency, or the data is being collected more in a telemedicine type approach. But there is still data being accumulated. It's now being backlogged, and the CRAs are not allowed to go in. And it's not, it's not likely that going forward, the CRAs are going to be allowed into sites on the same sort of methodology and periodic and infrequent approach, that they are today. So I don't see, as this rolls out, as the epidemic continues, that going forward, looking at a model where we send resources to sites to audit in quality after the fact is going to be a viable method. And you're hearing a lot more and more now around virtual trials, and the push for virtual trials, and virtual trials will be the new normal. And that's true, and that's great. But the majority of trials out there today cannot be 100% virtual. Right? There's virtual aspects. We can include technology as telemedicine, and stuff, but you're still going to require sites for the majority of trials, and patients are still going to visit sites. They like to visit sites. They like to visit their investigator. So that's going to be still a large part of the clinical trial process moving forward. But the more and more we can virtualize it, the better. And moving in ways that we can virtualize monitoring, but in an E6R2 compliant way, is going to be critical. So the new normal moving forward, will likely be something that is much more reliant on, virtual approaches and, empowering sites so that they can actually be adequately resourced and work directly within a monitoring paradigm so they can mitigate their own risks in a real-time fashion, should be the new normal. And from that side, I'll turn it over to you to walk through some of the technology enablers that exist today and that can immediately facilitate a new paradigm.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. And absolutely, I think what you kind of highlighted was the way that we've been doing clinical trials has really been a stopgap for many years, waiting for the right environment and the right technology to catch up. I think we're well there now. We absolutely need to embrace the technology that is available. And compared to only a few years ago, there's an enormous amount of technology that's available, both from a patient perspective, when you think about the variety of wearables and the amount of data that generates in clinical trials, right down to the sites themselves. So as we talk about site-facing technology and empowering sites, the technology has caught up, not only just from the analytics perspective and allowing that big picture overview that sites didn't have before, but also the communication and collaboration tools that are absolutely necessary to make sure that the right information is passed to the right person at the right time. And again, it might sound quite simplistic, but having that all kind of documented and fully audit trailed, and having that comprehensive workflow is absolutely essential. And all these elements are now available. All can be kind of put together. But that's another kind of point that we want to kind of stress here, that while all these technologies are available, they have to come together in a way to reduce burden for both the sites and the patients. There's no point introducing technology just to create and add complexity rather than simplification. I think Dan mentioned it very well at the beginning. The best solutions are the simple ones. They're the ones that stick, and they're the ones that really make sense because they are common sense. And we need to always bear that in mind from a technology perspective as well. But as I mentioned, these technologies can be put together and married in the right way, but they also got to be governed by a robust framework and processes that go with them. And along with that, you have the right team of people pulling all this together. So whether it's central monitors and data scientists from afar, right down to site personnel who are adequately trained with this technology, and understanding and getting the best out of it. Putting all those elements together, and it sounds cliched, but it's absolutely right. It's people, process, and technology working together that will give you the success that we're talking about here. How really to move the needle with clinical trials and virtualize them in a way that's better for sites, better for patients, and better for sponsors as well. So the ability to have those integrated solutions is available now. So with a risk management platform, Mike mentioned we have one called Raptor. It's been in use for many years. The algorithms are proprietary, but they've been refined over a number of years. But then you add that to data capture systems, making sure that all that data is available in near real time. You can pull all that data, visualize it. The central monitors will work directly with the CRCs to make sure that those decisions that need to be made can be made proactively. Again, moving away from that reactive issue management state is absolutely essential, because only then can you really make a difference in terms of getting to the point where you're confident about your clinical trial. Ultimately, that's what we all want. We want success. We spend millions of dollars every year with these clinical trials. While each clinical trial is a scientific hypothesis, the execution doesn't have to be. So that's what we want to get to make sure that we are pulling together the right pieces, including the technology, to increase confidence every time you execute a clinical trial. So from a future state perspective as well, I think things are looking even brighter. So there are rapid advancements in even better data capture technology, more integrated solutions, working with apps to make life simpler from the site perspective and the patient perspective as well, coupled with enhanced security, such as blockchain technology, allows you to get that seamless transition of data from all data sources into that one unified platform, which we were talking about it, and again, putting together the right people and the robust processes around it gives you the state that you really want to be in, that kind of paradigm where you get the most and the best optimum clinical trial that you can imagine.
Thank you, Syed. And I know we have some time restraints here, and we want to keep everybody moving forward. So I'm going to be really brief in what I'll call driving the new normal, and in some ways defining what integrated solutions or what solutions that we are talking about mean. Simply put, these solutions and systems use your structure and build around your structure to give you the full control, and sort of like having a small CRO built in that would be answerable to you and costed by a sponsor company. The solution's not for everybody, but it is for most. If you're a totally virtual pharma company, this would not work for you. It would be tough to make an integrated solution, which makes us a partner if we couldn't uphold what we needed to do. But if you are a small pharma company, we would integrate into your structure at a higher level usually. If you're mid and sometimes large pharma, we will not be redundant on your existing structure, but basically extend it and allow you flexibility. And the flexibility comes also with, be it our technology, or there are new technologies in other areas that are coming out okay, you can use them. We can use them and integrate those technologies into what I'll call our structure, because it is our sponsor company and us that makes R. Okay, you are no longer stuck with whatever technology a CRO has and what they or an Outlook solution is, and get yourself locked into that. And finally, since I know our time and I do want to get questions, whatever the case, our solutions and the solutions we look at are customized to what your needs are. And most importantly, these are not Band-Aid solutions. These are long-term solutions to bring that definition of efficiency that I gave you. Okay, reduce the costs, add quality, add speed, and bluntly, bring your company into a post-COVID day. So with that, I'm going to turn this back to Hillary. I don't know if we have time for questions, but maybe we can pop a few of them in.
Thanks, Dan. First question that we've received is from a mid-sized pharma company. And the question is, what are the challenges to the implementation of virtual monitoring and how can they be overcome?
So I'll give a little brief and then pass this to Mike. There are challenges to it, okay? But they're not hard challenges, okay? The first thing is a mid-farm company would have ongoing studies, okay? Some of them you wouldn't want to change, okay? Others you would want to implement some of the site direct things and get the most out of it. You probably would want to use any kind of solution to help the sites get up and running and bring us more to a normal state than we are now. But Mike, do you want to answer some of this? Hopefully in today's world, I didn't lose Mike.
Oh, sorry. That is a problem. I unmuted the conference, but not my headset. So sorry,
Yeah.
guys. So,
It happens when you get old, you push the wrong button.
so assuming you can hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, I mean, so I think in terms of virtual monitoring, and I'll differentiate that from remote monitoring. You know, a lot of the CROs right now are claiming they're doing virtual monitoring by saying, yeah, we're gonna remote monitor. Remote monitoring's been around forever. I think everybody's familiar with the challenges of doing remote monitoring because you really don't have true access to a lot of the data, and again, you're still got to figure out how you're going to push any information to a site, get that information back and into a system and stuff. So you really need a technology that's site facing and trained coordinators, and stuff for all that to work in a more virtual way. And I think one of the clear issues with implementing virtual monitoring up until now, or at least us implementing our adaptive site management model, was getting through the change management piece and getting the sponsors and the sites to understand the need for doing this, right? I mean, overcoming inertia is tough. We've been monitoring for the same way for a long time. So people are comfortable in that. Most sponsors have gotten drugs approved, monitoring the way we monitor today and stuff. So that there was a real challenge of just getting through that change management piece and getting people to want to move forward. They understood the quality benefits, they understood the cost benefits, but overcoming the hurdle, was difficult. Now post-COVID, it's become, I think, clear that it must be done, right? CRAs aren't going to sites. They can't go to sites. And if sponsors would have had a model like this in place already, they would be seeing the trials continue. They would be seeing the data quality being ensured, and be at much less risk than they are today with accumulating data with no true way to oversee it. So I think that some of that change management, just by the fact that we are going through this epidemic, and that's going to continue and change the model moving forward, is going to help significantly. The other challenges are much easier. Challenge to implementation. Our methodology you can deploy tomorrow, right? We don't have to statically integrate through APIs to all the EDC systems and IVRS and stuff up front. That can all be done in parallel while we start moving data in through a data transfer process and get data moving and this methodology in place very, very quickly. The integration process takes time, no doubt about it. But again, that's just something that is easily overcome. It just takes a little bit of time, but there is a way to do it in the interim. So those are just a couple of the challenges that are out there. I think I'll leave it there. There's obviously more we could talk about, but in the interest of time, hopefully that addresses the question.
Thanks, Mike. The next question has come in from a biotech. And the question is, what's the real cost of implementation versus the cost savings?
Maybe I can take that, and that's a really good question, because the perception could be that like many other quality initiatives, costs tend to increase. So when you think about the time and effort for technology integration, potentially additional roles such as central monitors and data scientists, as well as the upskilling and training of coordinators, all these will add costs. But you'd have to kind of weigh it against the savings when you significantly reduce on-site monitoring. And by the way, while you are reducing on-site monitoring, you are increasing the overall level of monitoring. So when you kind of pull all that together, the overall savings are potentially very large. Because we know, and we kind of highlighted that the majority of operational costs do come down to monitoring and on-site monitoring and travel. So once you kind of factor that in, you're potentially talking about 50% or more savings versus your traditional or even risk-based monitoring costs. So yes, there is effort with regards to implementation, but the overall cost savings very much there.
If I could add something. This is the way trials should be and should be done in the future. It is maximum efficiency, okay? And therefore, you are going to have a significant, and it would be significant. If this was implemented today, instead of the CROs charging for any kind of technology that would reduce site visits, or start charging for centralized monitoring, okay, this would should wipe out all of those costs. Therefore, short term, you're going to see maybe a 15 or 20% savings. Long term, it gets much higher, and you're also fulfilling the needs of the sites and increasing quality and everything else, therefore efficiency. Okay, Hillary, we can take another one maybe.
Yes, this is coming from a pharma company. Why has the industry not done this sooner, and is COVID-19 a trigger now?
I'll take part of that, and I'm going to let Mike take another part. Yes, the current epidemic has, without a doubt, forces the change. As I said in the beginning of what I began, you set up a system, be it when I founded RPS, we were ready in 2005 and 6 to bring an embedded solution to the industry, but the industry didn't move till 2008 when it was under financial crisis. Unfortunately, as RPS blended and as CROs got more and more involved, you literally have a middleman in there who makes profit off of this. And since a lot of them are very large middlemen, okay, they're public and move it. So the industry needed something that's just going to push it over the edge, And then all of a sudden, this industry becomes very innovative when that happens. When you take this solution to where the solution should have always been, it should be at the site. It shouldn't be at a CRA level and everything else. It needs to be at the site to the patient, which the link there are the CRC standardization and putting a system in for them to do it. And then to add that, one thing that does happen with this crisis is the ability to put CRCs and save sites becomes a very high priority. Mike, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that really covered, because I mentioned before the whole change management piece, which is I think why it wasn't done before, and now with COVID, that whole site aspect and the site's understanding of the need and willingness, I think, to operate in a different way is going to help facilitate implementation of this. And then, Dan makes a great point about the CROs, right? I mean, CROs will not want to implement this type of methodology because it would significantly decrease the revenue stream. But at the same time, moving to this model, even in an outsourced environment, is possible. Just means you have to strip out the monitoring from your CRO contracts, very easily done. And then, we can help you put in the right infrastructure that you could then manage this type of go forward methodology.
Thanks. That perfectly leads into this next question that has come in from a mid-size pharma. How is this solution affects performance at the site level? And right now they're seeing a lot of turmoil today. So could you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that leads right into it. I mean, there's definitely turmoil at the sites today, and much of that right now is being driven by, just like every other industry out there, every other job out there and company and stuff, they're all being impacted by resources. These research centers and hospitals and stuff are no different. They're actually all feeling the burden of being adequately resourced and having to let people go. And if you look at research centers, where again, they operate on maybe a 3-month operating capital, and then are relying on sponsors to pay for their resources on an ongoing basis, which is often 30, 40 days, 90 days. They're definitely turmoil right now, and so this can really help. I mean, adding the possibility of providing coordinators to those sites, is a key thing moving forward, I think, for a lot of sites, and that will actually help, as you get into new site development and areas of unmet medical need where investigators are struggling with, all right, how do I become a research site? I'm a doctor, I treat these types of patients. How do I build the infrastructure to run clinical trials? This type of methodology and the support that can be provided in terms of resources to the sites can definitely facilitate the site's performance. Sites also struggle with, how do you schedule CRAs to come in on a periodic basis, and they often, if they're a large research center, have multiple CRAs coming in and stuff like that. So having a more virtualized approach where the coordinators can focus 100% on clinical trials, but working on a daily basis on a given trial versus once every 8 weeks, I think will help them in a long way in terms of first of all, driving quality so it's right up front, so there's fewer queries and fewer issues along the way, but also just in managing their time and quality overall.
If I can add just one thing, and then I guess we're going to have to wind things up. A structural change, and we talked about Band-Aids, which we're about, but long-term solutions. One of the Band-Aids, and that this kind of structure that we're offering to people, or others could. One of the main parts there is, yes, you can put a coordinator into a site that desperately needs it right now and get them on their feet. The long term, you can take new sites and give them the infrastructure to run trials. Short term, you can use CRCs and certain of these people to do at home and other areas, okay? And then with the technology that stands behind them, okay? So you have a structural change at the CRC level, coupled with a technology advancement that now allows and standardizes, which is one of the biggest problems in this area. The coordinators are like the Wild West as far as standardization goes. Okay, standardizes them to input certain things that guide a trial. And therefore, you now have a short-term solution that becomes a long-term solution that adds efficiency. And most importantly, it adds flexibility, because we hope that innovation in the next year, 2 years, 3 years continues. It allows you to innovate rather than totally outsourcing, which limits innovation. And that way it would improve. So with that, I do want to thank everybody for taking the time. I think I forgot how long-winded Mike and Syed were. And I can still tell jokes but it's more fun in person. But we do want to thank everybody for taking the time. And we do hope, if you should have any more questions, and I'm going to turn to Hillary, she'll give instructions. We do like to go over solutions. We do like to hear from people who are out there and what's affecting them. And we very much believe, one thing Mike and myself and Syed are, we very much believe in being a partner versus an outsourced event. So thank you. Hillary?
Thank you, Dan. As I said at the beginning, we had more questions than we could get to today, but all of the questions that are unanswered will be directly addressed through your registration information within 48 hours. As Dan said, we would be happy to participate in a vendor qualification process so that we could continue our discussions. So please reach out to myself or any one of us for more information to keep the discussion going. But this concludes our podcast. Please watch for more newsletters, podcasts, and webinars from TPS. Have a great day.